Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Sober Living Stories podcast. My next guest is Faust Ruggiero. He's a psychologist who's been in private practice for more than 35 years. In 2016, he began to develop a book series called the Fix Your Self-Empowerment series. And with book 5 just hitting the shelves, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
He's here today to talk about his practice as a clinician, his experiences, his expertise in working with recovering addicts, alcoholics, and all the other areas that you have worked with. Just give us your expertise, your experience, what you see, and what this book is about that can help the person who is looking to overcome addiction. Welcome to the show.
Jessica, thanks so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. You know, when you talk about addiction, people almost always go right to drugs or alcohol. They tend to do that. And we know, particularly if you're recovering, anyone's recovering, you know, there's your primary addiction, and then there's all the other ones that come along with it. And then there's the ones you substitute when you get off when you when you go
Right.
into recovery, you know, so there's so many.
Right.
You know, in the book, I put 17, I think, with 17 addictions in the book. And I like to write, and the way I counsel, if you're coming into my office, my approach is, let's get all the information that we need about you. Let's give you all the information you know about, in this case, your addiction. And then let's give you action steps. These are things you can do to change it,
That's
you
right.
know. It's just like if you go to the 12-step program, what those steps are, they're action steps. That's what they really are. Let's do these things, learn all of these things. So, you know, I when I began to learn about treating addicts, it was really the 12-step philosophy that I learned, and that even though I'm not recovering, I follow this every day. This is one of my guideposts. So, you know, I wrote the book the same way. Let's put action steps at the end of all the chapters, and then at the end of the book, there's a 10 chapters of the master plan, if you will, to get yourself into recovery and progress through it.
Yeah. I had read an excerpt and I love the directness of it, how it said, what you put in, you're going to get out. And I find that to be really true because when people work really hard at overcoming something, they tend to be invested. So they're not going to step out as quickly to have to redo that process. And you also talk about support, how important that is. And then family, not just the person, but like how the family handles it. And those are such important components. Could you just kind of break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you talk about the first part of it, that commitment, how much you're going to put
Mhm.
in, you know, I always use the example of the person, let's say, who was drinking or using drugs and goes to the first 12-step meeting and decides they're going to sit in the back of the room and they're not going to get a sponsor and they're not going to do any commitments, and you know they're not really going to work the program, but they go to the meetings. They may go to two or three a week. That's great, but that's how much you're gonna get out of it. You're really not getting into the guts of the program. You know, so you want to, you know, what do you want to do? You want to select your meetings. You want to have a home group, and you want to take commitments and have a sponsor and work those steps. That commitment is essential, I think,
Mhm.
because you're
I
right.
agree.
Now you're invested. Now,
Mhm.
now you're doing the things you need to be doing, and it's a program for life. That's the other part. You know, people have to understand. You know, it's the person that comes in my office and says, "I just want to get cured from this," and I said, "Well, you're in the wrong place because I don't have one." You know, it's a lifetime program, but that's anything we do in our lives. That doesn't just apply to addiction. You want to make changes. I think we have to think enough of ourselves to say, "I like getting up and working on me every day. I like."
Yeah, I like how you put that. Yeah, you have to think enough of yourself too, because I really think that initial step to overcome any, and like you had said, you had 17 different addictions outlined in the book. So true. There's so many in all different areas of life. But when you make that like internal decision that I do not want to do it this way anymore, then you can come in and sit in the front row or do the thing that you have to do every day to succeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, you mentioned that family component. You know, it's never, if you exist in a family, in a work environment, lots of friends, whatever, everyone is affected by the addiction. Not only are they going to be dealing with the results of what you do and the
Mhm.
effects, they're also going to play their part in the addiction, because survival in the addiction means I get to do things to not rock the boat or protect my own interest, and now I'm enabling, and now and sometimes it's for profit. I like to keep you addicted so I have control over things. So, putting that family component in the book, and I did that in every chapter. So if the chapter was on
Oh, wow.
gambling or the chapter was on self-abuse or whatever, I
Hmm.
laid out the way I wanted to do this in the book was to talk about the addiction, give some statistics, but then I wanted to go into the production for the way it progressed from use to abuse to addiction. Then I
Hmm.
did another piece of the chapter that's what happens to a person in the grasp of the addiction. Then the following part of the chapter was the collateral damage, which is the family section.
Right.
Then I went into the steps for each and every addiction. Then I went into that whole guidepost, that's 10 chapters, that the
Hmm.
blueprint for getting sober. And that is not just an individual thing, it's a family thing. It
Yeah.
has to be. We don't get
Yeah.
out of nobody gets out of this unscathed. It doesn't happen.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so true. So I had heard someone say once, and I just thought it was kind of true. Like if you think about dancing, like, and you've been dancing like salsa your whole life with this person, right? And then when you go in and get well or get better or make a huge change, then you're going to start like dancing a different dance. And like they're either going to come along and learn that new dance with you, or they're going to probably fall away. And the ones that come and are committed to learning that new dance, everyone really profits from that. Or, the family system changes for the good. But it's hard sometimes to shift that,
Well,
isn't it?
one of the chapters I do on that blueprint for everybody to follow is what I call just about making decisions. You know,
Hmm.
people firmly believe that when they stop using the drug of choice, the activity of choice, whatever it is, things automatically get better. And I tell people that's only the starting spot. Now you're going to be into the repair work. Now you're going to be into understanding all the dynamics and all the connections involved in that addiction. So now is when all the work begins. Now is when you start to see all the things. Oh my
Yeah.
God, this is going to be this huge mountain in front of me, which of course is why we say one day at a time. Let's do things nice and simple. We keep it at your pace, but you keep on going forward. That's the key. Family will come along or they won't.
Hmm.
That's up to them. You will have decisions about who gets in, who gets out. That's why there's people, places, and things. You're going to make
Sure.
decisions now where you were on autopilot. I always call addictive autopilot before. Now you're on conscious decision making in everything you do. And the other part of making a decision or setting a boundary, whatever it may be, is now you've got to you have to defend all those things. Now you have to be accountable. And that's where you need help. You have to have a network,
Yeah, I
support
agree. I
people,
agree.
physicians,
Hmm.
clinicians, whatever they may be. Don't do this, try to do this on your own because you won't.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the listener, when you first hear like it's seems like daunting, like, oh, you have to do this and you have to do all this work. When you think about, being in an active addiction and then hitting the point where you make a decision, make a change, and then you have all this work ahead of you. But the end result and the process itself is so revealing to who you really are that it should be like, sure, it's difficult, but it's so rewarding. It's just it's everything. So I don't want listeners to be discouraged, although there's so much waiting on the other side of that. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and you're not doing it alone. I always try to make that distinction for my people. When you were in the addiction, you were doing this alone, and that's
Mhm.
what you chose to do. You didn't open up to anyone. Everything was a secret. There were all the games you played, all the things you did to maintain that addiction. You all did it all by yourself. Whether you believe it or not, whether you understood it or not, it was a lonely place to be. But you're not using addictive measures to move forward. Now we're opening up. Now,
Mhm.
if you're doing the right things, you're going to get a sponsor. That person, is going to be there for you. You feel like you want to use, you feel like things are getting overwhelmed. You can call that person anytime. If you're going to meetings, you know how this works. You don't just walk in 5 minutes late into the meeting. You get there 20 minutes ahead of time and
Mhm.
you talk to people and you exchange what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you're smart, you go to all different kinds of meetings. So you have your speaker meetings, but then you have discussion meetings and step meetings and big book meetings and all those things. So you do the right thing. You go to all these things. You let people in. You get a counselor if you need one who understands addiction. So you can start piecing your life back together. You let people in. Addicts don't do that.
Right.
Addicts tend to want to push people out. It's just if you pull the people in, you're no longer alone. And what looked like a monumental thing is a piece by piece
Yeah.
little thing you do every day. And then you start building little successes. And as you do those, you say, "Oh, I can do this. I
Mhm.
just have to keep doing it. That's all." And I keep my network close.
Yeah. Yeah, good points. Absolutely. And I think the relationships that you build in that are authentic and they are real, as opposed to maybe what was happening before.
It is. You know why? Most of the people you meet in the rooms, they're all trying to get better also. So all of a sudden, you've
Mhm.
come from a place where people weren't trying to do that. They were beating themselves up to a place where everyone is showing all the love they can, all the support
Mhm.
they can, all with a united goal, which is to stay sober. When did you ever have that in your life? When you
Mhm.
look at that, you say, wow, that's there, and I can rely on that anytime I need it. What a nice place to be.
Yeah. And what's great about 12 step, I think, is it is a program of action, but there's also a spiritual component. So it's like a combination, and it's that actionable steps that can take people through their everyday. And the cost of it is so good because it's relatively costs nothing. If you have nothing, you give nothing. But, it's just, it's really, and there's now with online, people can access it anywhere, even though in person is probably best. Sure.
You talk about the spiritual part and the higher power, and being a person of faith myself, I
Sure.
understand that and I teach that component that what I have it in the book, a chapter called Powerful Surrender. People assume that when you surrender, it's a weakness. But what you're really surrendering is all the garbage. You're taking all that stuff and you're surrendering it. I'm no longer going to be a slave to that. I am going to surrender to one entity, which is my higher power. You will define that as you define it. For me, it's God, but it may be something for someone else. And then you attach to that, and then you're able to work through your higher power and turn things over instead of worries and pain. You're able to you learn how to turn things over to the higher power, connect to a more powerful energy source, if you will, and move in that direction. Again, another part of the program that really help you in the transition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true as well. That surrender part may be difficult for people who've been going it alone, self-sufficient, independent, kind of fearless out there. And then they put all that down and they're like, supposed to give something over. And it's such a good flip of once you really can understand what that means, when you're kind of giving over control to something beyond yourself. And then you start to live in that. And once the contact's been made, you start to see it everywhere. So it's really a gift.
Well, it's hard for a lot of us to get humble and then say, I'm going to trust someone. All of a sudden,
Hmm.
this person who I've been, where I keep everything close, trust nobody, let nobody in, and I'm the master. At least I believe I'm the master of my own destiny. But what I am is I'm a prisoner of my own destiny. All of a sudden, I'm turning that over and saying, sure, you can come into my life. I'm going to let you have all this private information, and I'm going to trust you with that. And that's a big step to take. But
Hmm.
again, I tell people you're not going in and unloading your entire life at one time. It's again a step-by-step process. You learn how to touch. There's a back and forth with that. Because if it's a sponsor, you're going to trust your sponsor, but your sponsor is also in the program, so they have to trust you. So
Right.
that reciprocity is really, really powerful once it gets going.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is, from your experience over the last 35 plus years, what do you think is the hardest to do in the beginning couple months for people who are looking to overcome something? Is it just, basically like white knuckling kind of things, or is it getting back into their daily life or relationships? What do you see as the most difficult part?
The hardest part to me, it's a twofold thing. The first one is to make the decision to say, okay, I'm not doing well. I have to stop telling myself that, well, it'll be better, or it's bad
Mhm.
because that thing happened. It's not good because I'm not making good decisions, or the place in my life I'm at, I can't seem to get out of. So my first decision is that I'm going to get help. The second part of that is to now know where to go so you can
Mm.
start the help process. And I tell people, if it's an addiction, you have three or four ways you can go. You can go to a counselor, you can go to a 12-step meeting, you can go to your family doctor, or you can go online. I provide in every chapter, I provide the national numbers, the helplines for people to go to with every addiction. So you have places you go, you're going to make that first initial step. And for a lot of people, that the first step, and actually there's a fifth person you go to, which is a friend. Hey, my friend used to drink, and now he or she hasn't had anything in 3 years. They went to that meeting, and hey, can you help me out? I'm starting this.
Yes.
You just want to get someone else in the picture to help you make the first step, which is to get in there and get things started. Everything goes from that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think there's a lot of, it's hard to ask for help if you have not for years. And I think that, can delay your recovery for years. And so just that initial, like, go in and say, hey, I need some help, and just watch what happens, And I find that, if you're genuinely, if the decision's been made, you're showing up, people will bend over backwards to help you if you're helping yourself, if you're showing that interest and they know you really want to get well and make a change, they'll really step forward and help you.
And I think you've just touched on a very important point. Why are you making the decision? I have people that come and they'll say, well, I need help for my drinking, for example. Why do you want to get sober? Well, life it hasn't been good and I should do this. Are you married? Yes. How's the marriage? Well, my spouse says they're going to leave if I don't get help. I said, that's a great little push, but if you're doing it for them, you know where I'm going with this. It's not going anywhere because you didn't say, I need it. You're saying, if I don't do this, you're going to leave. Or you got in trouble with the legal system and they've sent you. Somewhere along the line, you have to be able to say, I am not doing well. Look at my life. My marriage isn't where it should be. Finances, maybe that's being compromised, or work, or friends. All those things. Physically, I'm not feeling good. I'm looking at the decisions I'm making and I'm really not where I need to be. I just don't feel good about my life. Now you're talking about a reason to make a change. My wife or my husband is going to leave. It's legitimate, but it doesn't put you in a position to finally get to the point where you say, I am making mistakes. It's not about them. It's about me. I have to change because I firmly want this. That's where those people who do that really increase their odds of getting into and maintaining sobriety. Doing it for someone else, you're going to do it. You know what that's going to do? It's going to create resentments. I'm doing it, but I really don't want to be here. I could be doing that tonight, or it's not my problem. It's yours. It's all that kind of stuff. Make the decision for yourself.
Yeah. So what do you think is, you hear people, regardless of, sure, it could be with alcohol, but it could be with anything, like, oh, I can get sober. I can't stay that way. So what's the staying power piece? Can you speak to that?
Easily, it's again, maintaining your network, and one day at a time, don't get ahead of yourself. I just have someone come in and we're just starting an addiction program. She's been drinking for 13, 14 years. And she says, how long will this take? I said, I don't know. She says, 5 years from now, I'll probably be okay. I said, I don't know. She said, well, you should know all these. And I said, no, I should not. What I can tell you is what you have to do today. And if you keep doing that, it's only about today. It's the place you're living. Sustained sobriety is not a destination for you. When you get there, and maybe you get your 10-year chip or whatever, fine, you got there. Now you can look back. It's a looking back, but you're only sober today. And I just keep people focused on what you have to do today. It's like working out. If you say, geez, I'm 50 pounds overweight, I can't lift anything heavy, and I can't walk for 10 minutes, let alone run. I'm not going to tell you to go in and grab this program and run with it. I'm going to say go very slow, little things one day at a time. Don't set goals on what you have to look like. Just go do the program the way you're supposed to, and everything else will take care of itself. That's what I tell people with this program. And the other thing is, try to enjoy the fact that you're working on yourself. It's not a chore. You're not beating yourself up. You were beating yourself up. Enjoy it. Be able to say, you know what? I'm going to get this. I love it. People around me are helping. I'm opening up. I'm feeling good about it. Be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So let me go somewhere else. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. So to me, there's a difference between a true alcoholic and somebody who's sober curious or wants to to live alcohol free, but they didn't really have a real problem yet, or, it's not working for them. So how is that approach different? I know that one seems to be like a life-saving mission, like, yeah, and the other seems to be a lifestyle change. And so, seeing as you've been doing this for quite a long time, how do you handle that differently when people come to you? Or do they not come to you for the one, but you see
Well,
more of the other?
it's about 50-50, so to speak. The ones that, my life's falling apart, I'm losing everything. I know I'm addicted. I'm doing this from morning to evening. That's easy. Easy to diagnose. The other ones don't present that way. They'll present with my relationship really stinks, or I'm depressed a lot or anxious a lot. And then as I start asking the questions, I'm inevitably just because of training and my own exposure to addicts, I always say, any substances in your life? And be honest with me. Let's talk about this.
Right.
And then they'll say, well, they won't tell me that they have a problem with it. They'll tell me that because other things are happening, maybe they drank a little more, or now they're smoking pot and they got their medical card, but they also buy some and they're supplementing their prescription, or the gambling, and well, I only do it once in a while, but yeah, how are your finances? Well, so when we go in and we start doing history and we start really getting all the facts together, that's when all this problematic behavior comes out. Sometimes I find addictions hidden there. Sometimes I find the movement toward that progression, that where it's going to take hold. And then the other thing, of course, is family history. Do we
Sure.
have any of
Yeah.
that in the family? Well,
Mhm.
any substance abuse, other addictions, mental health issues. When I go there, now we start unlocking door after door, and this stuff comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, when you get further and they say it's not really about the drink or the substance or the food or the sugar or the gambling, it's about what the behaviors that behavior brings, how it makes you feel. You're guilty, you're hiding, you're dishonest, you're shameful, which kind of colors your personality and how you handle the people in the world, right? And so I could see it. Yeah, that when you said it presents differently. Absolutely. Yeah, I could see that. So they both have both of those different aspects of whether it's alcohol-free living or rock bottom alcoholism, have an ability to positively get better.
Yeah, and I
Say,
we always want to educate people. People have a tendency to misinterpret, particularly drugs, which are legal, like alcohol and marijuana, and
mhm.
they're legal, or over-the-counter amphetamines and caffeine. Well, they're not doing any damage to me. And I say, example, someone comes in and says, I have so much anxiety. Now, I always go physical first. Okay, let's see what you're doing. Are you sleeping well?
Right?
Well, not so good. Caffeine? How much caffeine a day? Well, I have 3 or 4 cups of coffee. You make it black and strong. I asked, any energy drinks? How much sugar? And then, okay, by the end of the night, you're still, are you tired when you go to bed? Well, I am, but then I hit the bed and my eyes are wide open. I said, yeah, that caffeine presents that way. So, it's not because a drug is legal, it does not mean it's okay. We've legalized pot now, and everyone says, the old story, you can't get addicted to pot. Well, you certainly can.
Sure.
Absolutely. And long range, there is a marijuana toxicity that builds in the brain, and it's almost like an alcoholic's wet brain. After a while, that's
Wow.
very hard to reverse. So,
Mhm.
I try to let them know that, these addictions are compulsions, are where the brain is now becoming overly stimulated and you cannot stop.
Right.
There's a neurological component we have to look at with all of this. And it crosses all the addictions. The
Yes.
one
Wow.
thing all addictions have is that it stimulates the brain and the tolerance continues to build in all addictions.
Wow. So
The
just
one
because a drug is legal doesn't mean it's okay.
by
Yeah, that's
no means.
and that would be like caffeine, sugar, marijuana today. Absolutely. Yeah, I could see that. And so yeah, that's really, and it's just everywhere. Like, and there's just, everyone moves so fast and we consume so much. And, there's just,
It's interesting. When you look at the legalization of marijuana, everyone says, well, we legalized it because it has medicinal. No, we didn't legalize it for that. We like our drugs. We are a drug culture. We like the stimulation and the excitement. It produces tax dollars now. It's a big money crop, just like alcohol. That's why it's legal. You can't
Mhm.
stop it from being produced. So the government cashes in. We like our euphoria, so we push it. And now you'll notice it's not just legalized for medicinal purposes.
Right.
That was only step one. Now it will be legalized for recreation across the country. We will have a
Right.
whole new brand of addiction of addicts now. We will have
Yeah.
marijuana addicts.
Yeah, and if you look, yeah, and I think about the driving, drinking and driving bad, smoking and driving not good. And, if you look in the past over the years, I saw like in the past, say 20 years, just like this influx of the drugs change. Okay. You had the opioid epidemic before that. I mean, it was crack cocaine. I don't know. Like before that, it was something else. So I look ahead and I think of marijuana as being like this, even though it's like there's a dispensary on every corner. I don't know where you're from. I'm in Florida and I kind of see them crop up and I'm like, wow, okay, this is like every corner.
Uh-huh.
And when I was in Colorado, it was legal at that time. I think it was legal when I was there, but not here. I don't even know if it is here or not, but how can something be so available for medicinal purposes and not be abused or overused in other areas? It's
It's
just,
like
I
any
don't see
drug,
how it's going to be good.
opiates were manufactured to deal with
Mhm.
intense chronic pain. Well, look where the opiate epidemic went.
Yeah.
Marijuana will be the same thing. It's not going to be the hard drug like an opiate, but the opiate you might have,
Mhm.
depending on the person, you might take it 10 times a day, or you might take it 2 or 3 times a day and get addicted. Marijuana, it's not just, you put it in your pipe and smoke it anymore. The roots to get it into your body, gummies and other oral roots to
Mhm.
they have their pens with them, and people don't know because the smells are all disguised. So now you walk out and you take a hit off your pen and it goes on all day long. And people will say, and where I think where I'm going to go with this. People will say, I'm doing that because I get anxious. No, you're doing that because you're addicted, because when you stop, it goes down and you got to
Yes.
bring the drug back up in your body. So now what used to be something that helped you with your anxiety now
Mhm.
creates your anxiety and you
Mhm.
use more of it. That's the addictive flow. And
That is
people
the
don't,
textbook addictive flow,
it
right? Mhm.
absolutely is. So
Mhm.
that's what we'll expect next. You know,
Yeah.
we, so I always say we're gearing up for the next new addicts that will come in there, and they will be younger because of the
Mhm.
pot. They will start smoking pot much, much younger. It'll be
Mhm.
legalized. Parents will be smoking. It'll be around the house. There's the vape pen over there, and the kid
Wow.
walks over and does this, holds his breath, and walks out of the room, and we have a whole new
Wow.
clientele, and
Mhm.
it's gonna be something that we have never seen before.
Yeah, I remember about 10 or 15 years ago, or maybe 10, I don't know, when the pills were big. And I remember thinking, gosh, I've never seen so many young people, like 20, say 20, 30, in so much pain that they needed to. And yeah, and just people that college kids just started stealing things and, just unexpected, like regular, it just took over so many people's lives. So yeah, the marijuana thing, it's just up and coming and it's bigger and bigger and it's everywhere. So we'll just see where this plays out. So too, you talked earlier about, we were touching on like addiction transfers. It's like you put down one and then maybe you stop drinking and then you pick up food or, oh, I can't drink, so I'll have dessert. And then it turns into something like bigger. And the same behaviors start to be like, so like where everything gets smaller. So what are some of the most common like addiction transfers that you see in your practice?
Food is a big one. That's huge. I see a lot of that. I see gambling, they'll go to that, one drug to the other, alcohol. Okay, maybe now I'm dabbling in pills just a little bit, or now I've
Uh-huh.
started to smoke instead, pot. I see a lot of that going on. Exercise is another one,
Oh
good.
yeah.
Now I'm going to get myself healthy. I'm off the drug or the alcohol. I'm going to get myself healthy. Now I'm going to the gym 7 days a week and I'm spending 2 hours there. Now along with that, oh man, I'm starting to look good. So now I'm going to change my diet and all the
Right.
stuff is going out. I'm just going to put tons of protein in and I'm not
Right.
doing. So now the key is that once the brain gets used to the acceleration and the high and all that euphoria, it seeks it out. What we're really doing with addicts, if we treat them properly, is to learn how to take that euphoria and drop it down a bit on a scale of 1 to 10, so to speak. The brain now wants an 8, but the brain will be just as happy at a 2, which is fine. We want to get back to simple pleasures.
Right.
Addicts have a difficult time doing something very simple, simple pleasure without their drug of choice with them. So we want to, the training is to get that brain to slow down,
Sure.
not seek out all this huge, this large, this overabundance of euphoria it does not need. Because if we
Yes.
don't do that, then the brain says, okay, I can't drink or I can't, what else can I do? So then we do all the rationalization. Well, I was doing that. That was terrible. I'll just do this now. Or this is healthy for me now. I'll just do that. And now
Right.
we have the same person taking their addiction, transferring it to something they have now rationalized, and essentially they're active addicts yet.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one extreme, it's extreme. And so you want to try to get to this middle road. And in that middle road, I think what happens is, at first it's uncomfortable because it's not familiar to a lot of people who've been living like addicted. But when you get there and you experience like the calm, the peace, the serenity, the simplicity, because it's a lot of work to maintain an addiction, no matter what it is, whether you're hiding it or eating all protein or going to the gym or, whatever it is. But so when you live in that middle road, it's a really great place to be, but it doesn't seem so inviting to someone who's been living at extremes, and I know that was true for me. But really now the goal for me is like to get to that middle of the road and to stay there more often because that's where you can really enjoy your life and like see people and like eye to eye and present tense and how time becomes important and more meaningful. So there's real, because I remember years and years ago, my main goal of my life was to just like calm my mind down and to just not have it race and to just be calm. And, somewhere along the line in the busyness, it comes back and it's like, oh, no, no, how do I get back there? And you get back there by, living a life in the middle, I think, if you're an addict
Well, you
or
do.
an
It's
alcoholic or,
I try to help people understand that our brains learn. If we and learning is just repetition.
yes.
It's
Yeah.
repetition.
So it's not this ingrained, like you can't be that because you're that.
No, the
Right.
brain.
It's a retraining. Yes.
So
Talk about that a little. That's really interesting to me. And I bet to listeners
you
and
know,
hopeful.
it is. I tell people, think about it this way. You didn't just, you're a kid and you were born an addict and start doing all these things. Somewhere along the line, you train your brain to accept this higher level of acceleration, this action.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So that should tell you that the brain can learn. Now, if the brain can learn that, why can't the brain learn to slow
Mhm.
down and appreciate things at a more simple level? What you have to do is give it the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. That's so
Now,
good.
I have a friend that lives in the city, and when I would visit him, it would be sirens and it would be action, and let's go to this club and people everywhere. And, we get back to his apartment, and I would say, let me just calm down. He'd come to my house, and when it was time to go to bed, I had to put a television in his room. This is way back in the 80s,
Right.
in his room just for noise.
Right.
If,
Right.
if he didn't hear the sirens and the yelling and the screaming, he couldn't go to sleep.
Right.
Training
Right.
program. We get into recovery. One of the things we're doing is retraining our brain to understand and be able to enjoy simple pleasures. It's sort of like you're going to the fair and you can enjoy walking around and having a nice time and talking to people versus the one that's got to get on that roller coaster and go
Right.
frontwards and backwards and upside down.
Right. Right.
And if they didn't get on the roller coaster, how was your evening? That was okay. We just kind of walked around and did nothing. Versus the other person who says, was really enjoyable. I saw so and so, we grabbed something to eat. It was nice and calm. We had a wonderful time, went home, and it was nice and easy.
Yeah.
Look
So,
to do that. Not that you have to do it all the time.
sure.
Nothing wrong with riding the roller coaster, but you shouldn't need to do it. That's the key.
Right. You shouldn't need to do it. Right, right. And so before you talked about you address the physical with your clients first. So what do you see as the physical component? Like that must be such a gift to your system to slow it down and to not have to live it in the extremes. You're talking about health, like life longevity, all of those things. Like, doesn't that affect your health in a really positive way when you kind of take it down?
Absolutely. What we have, the first part of physical, I like to get people to understand is that there is no such thing as an addiction that is only psychological or mental.
Wow.
We're physical organisms. We feel euphoria in our brain.
Right.
Some people can say, we're going to go out tonight and I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine. I already
Mhm.
know that. That'll be my limit and I'm fine. Never think about that for the rest of the week. The next person goes out and has one. And you know the old story, if I have one, I'm going to have 100. So, so they can't have the one because their brain is not set up that way.
Mhm.
That one will trigger the addictive response in the brain, and they'll want to continue to supplement that.
Yes.
So it's physical. You got to have to understand that, and you're not going to think your way out of it. There's a plan. AA has a plan. It does address the physical. It doesn't do it directly, but everything it does in that slow down, teach your brain, people, places, and things,
Mhm.
all that's designed to slow neurology down. It wasn't the Bill W.'s intent. However, when you break it down in terms of what happened, that's what's going on the physical level. And we
Wow.
want people to understand that. That's why you say, I think you said it was alcohol that you were addicted to.
Mhm. Yeah.
But if you and I went out for the evening, I could have 1, 2 drinks and I'd be okay.
Right.
If you had the one, we don't know what's happening now. Maybe you were lucky.
Exactly.
Maybe you were fortunate and said, called the sponsor, said, "Yeah, help me, I just screwed up." Or
Right.
you go home and on the way home, you stop at the liquor store and purchase a bottle. We don't
Mhm.
know what's going to happen with you. That's the neurology that you
That's the
have that
difference.
you're
Mhm.
born with. I wasn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much good stuff. I really, I'm enjoying this conversation. There's so much truth to everything you're saying. Yeah. So what would you say to people who are listening who for your series of your book? Let's talk about your book a little bit.
When I started doing this, I wanted to help people empower themselves from the inside. That's my way
Mhm.
of doing things, and get to a point of balance. We're physical, we're intellectual, we're emotional, we're spiritual. Again, if you look at the 12-step program, it hits all four of those.
Mhm.
We want to get those in balance, not at a high level anywhere. I always say on a scale of 1 to 10, it could be a 2 or a 10. It's irrelevant. So
Right.
they're in balance. So I wanted to help people
Mhm.
learn to do that, get their emotions down, get more clarity of thought, get their body in physical shape so it helps them, it's not a hindrance, and hopefully to connect to your spirituality. That was the first book. The pandemic hit and we looked and I said, all right, look at the anxiety level here. So second book was the Fix Your Anxiety Handbook.
Mhm.
Following that, we saw depression coming at the end of the pandemic, so we went with depression. Well, we saw in the country what the presidential election just personified the anger
Mhm.
that we're
Mhm.
experiencing. So that was the fourth book. But I always
Okay.
had this in my head that I needed to do one on addiction. I've worked so much with addiction and at so many levels. So the fifth book was the Fix Your Addiction Handbook. Interestingly, the 12-step programs in my area, of course, a lot of people I know in the area I've treated came back and said, I bought the book. Do you mind if I take this to my meeting? Please do. And now the 12 steppers are in my area are starting to use this as supplemental reading, which is really nice to hear,
Mhm. Yeah.
So the goal of that book is really to help people understand that, this is something that if you're willing to work with, there are ways to do that. There's an
Mhm.
abundance of treatment out there if you're
Sure.
willing to do it.
Yeah. And
And
just in talking to you, I could tell that, I mean, well, because you have been in this for so many years and worked with so many people. If someone is working a 12 step and wants to supplement with this, if they're not going to a therapist, if they're not able to go to a therapist because of expenses or this or that, like purchase this series, walk through it. It's not like it was written, when I was reading the excerpts, it really resonated with me. It spoke to me because of the directness of it and the actions. And I love the family component, like we had talked about earlier, because everyone's living in that and it helps them kind of navigate through that. You have a lot of success with it. It just came out, what, 3-4 weeks ago?
3 weeks ago, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At the beginning of the month, if any advice I give to people is don't play with recovery. There is no such thing as your version of recovery. Everyone likes to think that way. Recovery, the way I teach it and the way I counsel, is an all or nothing proposition. It's just you can't get your defenses and deny this and rationalize that, and it doesn't work. You got to be brutally honest with yourself and the people that are helping you. If you're willing to say, okay, it's done, I am putting myself into this, and yes, I know what I'm signing up for. It's going to get hard. However, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And every step of the way, as hard as it gets, there's going to be that person there who is going to help me. You don't have to have a counselor right away. There are support groups everywhere for all the addictions. They're online.
Exactly.
There are
Mm-hmm.
12-step programs. There are free ways to do this, and people just waiting to wrap their arms around you, but you got to give them a chance.
That's right. That's right. Well, it was such a pleasure having you on today. So much good information. Where can people buy the book and where can they find you during the week?
The best place for both of that is my website. It's my name, FaustRuggiero.com. And as you said, excerpts from the books are there. You can see what they're like. Everything about the books, myself, media appearances, all those things, they're all there. And there's a contact link. And I do get back to people if they contact.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of that information to listeners.
It has been a pleasure. Thanks for asking me.